best like litmus test is give someone a lot of money, okay, and then see what they do after that.
My whole idea or philosophy around the buyer's agency is that's just become now a tool for me to be able to help more people.
As long as the great Australian dream is to buy a home, we can be as irrational as we want with economics and people will still buy homes, right? Hey small business heroes, welcome to the Latitude Accountants podcast. Here at Latitude Accountants, we believe that the small business owner is the hero of our community. And we are fortunate enough to interact with hundreds of small business heroes every single day. In this podcast, we will be showcasing our local small business heroes and talking all things business, money, and tax. And today, property. Today, we have the absolute pleasure of welcoming Ravi Sharma, the Director of Search Property and host of Personal Finance with Ravi Sharma. After buying his first property at age 22, Ravi found a passion in property and used that passion to start his own buyer's agency, Search Property. Since its founding in 2020, Ravi and his team have been named as finalists for the Best Buyer's Agency 3 years in a row and even featuring in AFR's Top 100 Fastest Growing Startups. On a personal note, I've been a huge fan of Ravi since day one, watching him build his YouTube channel from scratch to over 60,000 subscribers. One of the things I like most about Ravi is he's got skin in the game. Ravi's own property portfolio exceeds $12 million, so he walks the walk and he's passionate about helping others do the same. With all that being said, Ravi Sharma, absolute pleasure to meet you. How are you, mate?
Thanks guys for having me on here. What an intro. Far out, puts me on the spot.
I just went to your website.
Yeah, nice.
And done a bit of research. All right, Ravi. For starters, why don't you... So I've seen your journey, obviously, since COVID, March 2020. That's when I sort of started following the YouTube journey. But take me back a little bit before that. You go out and buy a property at age 21, 22. Most young men at 21, 22 definitely... Well, I say most, it could be more than what I think, but definitely not thinking about buying property and probably off doing other things. How do you get into property at a young age? What's your mindset like growing up? Who influenced you? Like, tell me the story of how you go from being a regular young guy to buying property at 21.
I think, for my story, it was like you usually see, or a lot of people have this story where their parents or their relatives, they get into property early and then they're like, oh yeah, cool, I can do this as well. And for me, it was, yes, dad had bought, he became an investor by accident. And what usually happens at that age, they're like, oh, we did well with the first property, let's go buy another one and do the same thing. So that's where I guess the seed was planted. But then it was really my brother who pushed the envelope. And he basically said to me, look, hey, I've heard that this conference, this property conference you should come to and let's go, we can check it out because they're going to help us retire by 30. Now, we've seen our parents grow up and they've just gone and worked and worked and worked. And my brother's come to me going, hey, by the time we're 30, so in the next 10 years, we can retire. I was like, yeah, sign me up, let's go. And so we went and it was like your typical, some old dude in this suit, 2 sizes too big, walks around and tells us negative gearing and, buy house and land stuff. It's going to be the best thing ever. And so everything that we took away was not much from the conference, apart from one line, which was buy 10 properties in 10 years and you can retire. So that's what stuck with us. We walked away and we're like, how do we get 10 properties in 10 years? People struggling here to buy one house, how are we going to buy 10? And that's when we started that research part and trying to figure out we can buy outside of Sydney because I was born here. That's all I ever knew. And so we started looking regionally and going, hey, the prices for a house is so much cheaper. People still want to live in a house. And yes, it's not in Sydney, but it's just law of, economics, right? If there's 10,000 people in a suburb and there's 10,000 homes, that's equal. But if there's 10,000 people and there's 1,000 homes, the prices have to go up. And so what we found was the ratios were better in regional areas because most people weren't focusing there. People who were there would hold on to their properties for ages. And so for us, we were like, regionally, I can get positive cash flow. At the time, rates were quite high, higher than now.
What year is this? What year was that?
This is now maybe 10, 11 years, so 2012, 2013. Yep. And so we knew that at some point it would work out because the rents will keep increasing. Some people just couldn't buy and some people didn't want to buy. So that's pretty much where the seed was planted. You just get 10 properties. By the time you're 30, you retire. I'm not retired. I'm 31, bro. So must have done something wrong.
The plan didn't work. What happened?
It all failed, mate.
Can we go back and call the bloke on stage?
Yeah, I know. Where's the receipts? But no, the truth is, I think retirement changed, and you guys are in the same boat where you find out what you like. You know, retirement was more like, I don't want to be answerable to anyone. I don't want to work a job when I don't want to work, having choice. So I figured that out maybe 24, 25. And that's when I felt like I retired from the rat race, or the race where I was pretty much just trying to get the next job just to get ahead. And that's when I realized, okay, I need to find something I absolutely love, because mate, at 25, if you've got nothing to do, it's pretty boring. Yeah. Everyone else is just working. And so I had to realize that I need to find something I love. And for me, property was always that consistent part in my 20s. So I was like, I need to do something in property. And obviously started with like conveyancing, got really bored, did like mortgage broking for a bit. And I was like, that's not for me. And then the buyer's agency stuff worked out because a lot of friends were like, I want to do what you just did. And I was laughing at you like 10 years ago, but now I want to do it. And so it was just like the best way to help people. And I thought that there was a gap there.
Excellent. So just on that, you mentioned you breezed through it very quickly, but actually, you know, before I ask, I just want to ask a quick question. Who were you in high school? What were you like? What was your personality like? What were your mentors, friends, people around you?
That's really interesting, because I was like the goody two-shoes. I was the school captain, SRC for like 9 years, you know, school darks. Like I did everything the right way.
Right.
But it was, and I look back and I was like, I was definitely not the smartest kid. I just knew the systems. And so for me, I knew what my strengths were, which was, hey, this exam that we have to do, which is the HSC, makes no sense because all you're doing is rote learning some information and just regurgitating it. So I just played the system. And so I had a lot of time. So I was in like the smart group, you know, friends, but a lot of the guys I got along with were the ones that didn't really want to be at school. Yeah. They just needed to get through. And it's interesting now, 10 years later, the guys that didn't really want to do school are the guys running their own businesses, and those are the ones I'm friends with. And the guys that I, you know, did schooling with have got, you know, your 9-to-5 jobs, which there's nothing wrong with. Yeah. But I just think they didn't think outside of the box. They didn't want to invest. They just did what everyone else was doing. Buy the house. They're stuck for the next, you know, 50
Did you follow that pathway though through uni, the conventional model? And
yeah, I did. And I just felt so out of place. Like I went to uni and then I thought this was the same thing as a HSC. You rote learn. The good thing was I was trying to make friends and connections, improve my communication.
What did you enroll in?
I did a Bachelor of Business, major in marketing, right? So I was like, it was very open-ended. Okay, I wanted to get into like marketing out of advertising. So I did the uni for 3 years, blitzed that, and then I was like, okay, cool, get a grad job. So I worked at Mars Chocolate and I got into the corporate world. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
And then I get there and there was a conversation I had with my manager at the time. She was like a gun. So she's started where I started. She did that for 10 years and she was like some manager, like high shot. And she goes, Ravi, you know, if you do everything well, everything I say, and you smash it, you'll get to where I am in 10 years. And I was like, well, I don't want to be where you're in 10 years. This is shit.
That's a pivotal moment that has to happen in everyone's career. If you're in a job and you look upwards, and if in 10 years time, you don't feel like you can't put yourself in that person's shoes, it's time to start thinking about where you actually are.
100%. Yeah. And so I knew that like that looks very attractive, and it probably looked attractive for me 5 years before that. But at that point in my life, I was like, no, I need something more. And that's when that seed got planted for I need to run my own thing.
Yeah, cool. All right. So you go out, you buy the property at a young age, you develop yourself in the career. How old are you when you start the business?
So I started a couple of different things. So the conveyancing I got into, I was probably 22, 23 maybe.
Did you just go straight into businesses, or did you get runs on the board in doing, like if you were going to conveyancing, did you work under a conveyancer?
Yeah, I was working under a conveyancer. So I was trying to get my license and all that. So I never ended up setting my own conveyancing up because while I was doing that, I was like, I'm in my early 20s, I'm single, I want to go out. Yeah. And so when I started going out, I realized there was promoters and they were getting paid to be out. So I was like, well, okay, I want to get paid as well. So that was the first company. Correct.
No way.
Yeah. So I started promoting at nightclubs, and while I was doing conveyancing by day, which was like the most boring, dry thing I could personally find, at night times I was like, you know, talking to DJs that were like flying around the world and that were hosting events at Ivy and whatnot. So
you were like an academic.
Yeah, that's right.
So you're an academic kid at school.
Yep.
You're a school captain. You're doing well and getting grades, getting into uni, and then you got traditional, I imagine, some sort of, you know, conservative parents, family, and then you go pivot into nightclub scene.
Yep.
What was that conversation like at home?
Well, they were okay with it while I was still doing conveyancing because I was like, oh, that's the big picture. Like, this is a bit of fun.
Just a side.
Yeah. And I
Side
remember
hustle,
like
okay.
my first weekend, my parents were overseas. I don't think I've mentioned this stuff on like YouTube and stuff, so this is cool. And I was at home and I've just started my first promoting job and I made $25 for one weekend. And
By the way, which club?
this was Argyle.
Okay.
Argyle.
Yeah,
Anyone that's following in that knows, it was just saying Ravi's guest list. That's what they were saying. And so $25, I messaged my mum. I was like, yeah, I made $25. And my dad's basically like, oh, that's cute. Like, that's cool.
Yeah.
And then that ramped up to like getting to $1,500 a week. And so I was just doing that on Fridays and Saturdays. And then it got to a point where I leveraged social media and I didn't even have to go in. So suddenly I'm making like $500, $600 on a Friday night sitting at home. And then meantime, I'm like doing a bunch of extras work as well. So like, talent agencies, doing ads and stuff. So yeah, it was just multiple sources of income and it was just a bit of fun.
Yeah, awesome.
What a hustle, man. That's amazing. I like that. Like we all have that story to some extent. Like when you're coming through your professional development or career, you're trying to find what you're going to do. You end up doing random things.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I found myself when I was doing my cadetship at Hull Chadwick, I would need the extra cash and my dad had a cab, so my dad wouldn't be driving it some weekends, so I just jump in the cab after work and then go drive for 24 hours on the cab, making extra $1,000 like I'll just keep going. Like I just hit the Red Bulls and just keep driving all night until I knew I had to stop basically when I started hitting like curbs and that about 3 4 after about 20 hours and I go, I better go home now. But I would make $300 in the day job and then make $1,000 on a Friday, Saturday. That's on the cab.
That's mad.
That were the best times. Like that $1,500 you were making, it
bro,
probably felt like $1 million.
Mate, I felt like I was a baller. Like the stuff that you see on Instagram now, like I wasn't on Instagram back then, but it was like, the people were driving their Bugattis and stuff. I felt like that, even though it was $1,500, was still get the Uber to like local Woolies.
I'll never forget. When I was at Latitude, I had my tax agent number.
Is this confession time? Please, Jacob, tell us about what you were doing on the side.
I went and did a tax return, and I made like it was $300, 2 years tax returns, or 3 years tax returns. Even it was $100 tax returns. So I made $300, and the next day the boys went to Rockpool. Yeah, and the bill at Rockpool ended up coming up to like $300, $350. And everyone's sweating. Everyone, when they're eating, everyone's happy.
The bill comes out, everyone's sweating.
Give me this, give me that. The bill comes out, everyone's sweating bullets. And I pull out the $300 of cash that I made yesterday, throw on the table. There's nothing, you feel so rich. So I'm glad, I love that experience. Very cool. All right. So you get the itch, the entrepreneurial itch, it sounds like. You're doing that side hustle, you're making extra money, feels good. And then you go out and start the business, right? Before I get into the business, tell me a little bit about your philosophy, and I want to read something off your website. So we specialize in high growth and high cash flow properties across regional metro markets in Australia. Effectively, what I get from yourself, your content, the brand that you're building is very much rent investing, effectively, right? So you've obviously identified that it's hard for a young person to buy some property. I could be wrong in my assumption, so you're happy to push back on that. But it's difficult for a young person to buy property. So let's do the rent vesting model. Why don't you tell the audience, and you've actually been on Mark Burris's podcast and told Mark Burris about this. So if you haven't listened to Mark Burris's podcast, because I know it's like it doesn't get as many views as this does. But no, we love Mark Burris here. So what is rent vesting and why do you think it's a good tool to help you get to where you want to be?
Yeah, I think it depends on where you live, right? So for me, growing up in Sydney, the only option I had was I could buy a unit. Was I happy living in a unit? No, I didn't want to live in one. So I was like, okay, if I did want to live in one, I wanted to live in one where the amenities were great. I wanted to be around certain things, different location. And when I realized that I could go ahead and buy that one property, but then I'm stuck. And just with how lenders work and, your borrowing capacity, I'm like, I then fall into the trap that my parents fell into, which is I've got to work for the next 40 years to pay this off. And maybe I get 1 or 2 properties along the way. It's by chance. And then, I have a comfortable retirement at 65. Now, yes, 65 is not old anymore. Like you still can do a lot, but I want to be doing that at 45. I want to do that at 40. So I realized that if I go and buy a property that's worth, say, $1 million, I can go and rent the same thing for like half the price. And then I can use the rest of my disposable income to go and invest in other properties. And then eventually I've always got this dream to buy the dream house in Sydney, right? Now that's probably going to cost me like, $5 to $7 million. So instead of going up front and saying, I'm going to buy this house, it's not my forever home, but I'm going to buy it because it's going to go up in value. let me go do this in the markets where all the numbers make sense. I diversify my risk, and then I can always have the choice of living wherever I like. Because in that option where people go ahead and buy a property and say, okay, well, it's not my forever home, I'll just upgrade and then avoid like capital gains and all that, that can work. But now you're stuck in terms of your lifestyle. You're living in an area that you could only afford to live in because you bought. So my thought was, in my 20s, I don't want to be sort of known as someone who worked so hard, didn't have the time to enjoy 20s, lifestyle, go to Europe. I did all those things, but still invested well. And that was only because I just took a different direction. So when you're rent vesting, you're basically going, if you rent in Australia, you've been known to be poor, right? It's like, it's poor.
There's stigma around
it. Correct. Oh, you're renting? Oh, you're poor.
I'm only a renter. There's an ad I'm only a renter.
Exactly. And so when you start going, rent vesting is an actual thing, I think if the stigma got removed, I reckon more people would do it. They just have to fall into this trap. It's like, oh shit, what my parents going to say? What's my auntie going to say? So they end up buying something they don't like.
So I love what you say about that, because if you look at, median house prices in Sydney, they're huge, especially compared to regional or other capital cities. And then you look at the rental yield you're getting back, let's say an area which is $2 million for an average house, you might be getting $800-900 a week in rent, $1,000 a week in rent. If you actually want to live in that area, would you be encouraging people often to rent in that area and then go look for these special, high yield properties?
Yeah, for sure, man. And I think like the first part to that is, I live in an apartment, it's a penthouse, really nice. And the bloke paid $2 million or $2.2 million for it, but it rents for $1,200 a week. So I'm like, would I rather spend $2 million here, get stuck? I don't even like the place that much to buy it for $2 million, or I can rent it here, enjoy all the facilities and the location, and then meanwhile I can spend that $2 million elsewhere. My borrowing capacity is higher because obviously I've got better cash flow as well. And the second part to that is just knowing that if you're going to go down this path, like you got to be comfortable not owning your own place for a bit. And I think that's the other part is I can talk to you about numbers all day, but usually you'll find one in the couple that are not on board.
Are you talking about the wife?
I thought it was always going to be the wife, but it couldn't be the other way.
No, can I? So you're what we call the DINK, right? The dual income, no kids.
No kids, correct.
Yeah? So, okay, so you just talked about the stigma around being a renter and not owning the property you want to live in, and you can talk about all day about the numbers making sense, whatever. The biggest argument I see against that, there's two, right? One is the blue chip. So no, you need to go out and buy blue chip properties, especially when you're younger, because there's a higher growth side to it. And I'm sure you have some kickback on that. Being obviously the rental yield might not be as good. How do you stay in the game? Cash flow gets you in. This is a Ravi quote. Cash flow keeps you in the game.
Yeah, correct. That's it.
So you might not get that with the blue chip property, right? But what I think ties people down to the fact I need to buy a home is something I've realized is that when you are with your spouse, you have children. The children need to go to school. The children need daycare. You're around your community. You might be a part of a local church, local community, something like that. You effectively have to then tie down to that community, or at least people feel an affinity to that community and tie themselves down to that community. How do you get around that with the rent vesting philosophy? Like, so there's a NAB, I think there's a NAB or a Westpac ad where they buy the home and they get the 30-year mortgage, but at least the kid doesn't have to move schools every so often because we got kicked out of our previous rental property.
Yep.
Is there an argument against that? Like, is that a strong argument? Like, what do you think of that?
Look, there's always going to be pros and cons, and you'll never know the alternative. So in my case, if I had bought a place that I wanted to live in, be with the community and all that, who knows what that life looks like? It definitely wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
But the idea of, say, purchasing property, like in that whole idea that I want certainty. Like I want to be here. My kids have to move school. Yeah, you're right. Like, but do we want the bigger gain? Like I want to be at home with my kids. So rather than them having a good community and like going to the shops and like knowing my neighbors, I would much rather for the next 5 years focus on building up a base. And my kids are going to be young. Like everyone's different, right? But I don't have kids at the moment, so they're going to be young. They won't even remember that. But when they do start remembering it, I can take them to school. I can spend time with them after school. I remember, like you probably in the same boat where your parents just worked all the time. You probably didn't see one of your parents at all because they're working all the time. They're hustling. And so that was a big motivation for me to do this, was I wanted to go build out the portfolio so that when the time comes to be able to spend time with kids, I don't want to have to go, hey, I've got to take this phone call for business. Now, things can change and whatnot, but at least I've created that choice for myself to go, I can spend time with the kids. And when that happens, and that's because I delayed that gratification of, I need a place to stay. Now, mind you, the places I like rent are so much better than what I could afford anyway. So I've probably increased my lifestyle that way anyway.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good.
I think there's something to be said for that in terms of starting early, starting young, getting into the game, letting the market do the work with you, and then you're still relatively young, even when you have that family, even when you need to stabilize in your life. So
yeah, bro, like starting early, you buy one property, and people now as well, they're like, one property that's going to do nothing. Yeah, it might not, but like in 2 years' time, you'll got the equity to go again. Yeah. And then by the time you get to 10 years, you're like, I'm actually building out a pretty big base. And that you guys both mentioned blue chip properties, right? You get told, okay, well, blue chip properties, they've got lower cash flow, but they've got higher growth.
Yeah.
If you look at my portfolio and what we do with clients, it's like they're growing at more than 10% a year. And that's been over the period for my case, it's like 10 or 11 years. And I buy in regional areas. So this whole idea of high cash flow properties don't grow, if the numbers make sense, they'll grow.
With the regional areas, we saw that during COVID, they really took off because a lot of people started working from home and going, further out from the major capitals and, coming in online. And then in some of those markets, and I know everything's granular, and I know you're looking at, segment by segment, but in some of those regional areas, we saw those markets come backwards. How did you see your client base affected because of that movement? And were you investing in these sorts of regional areas pre-COVID? And did you see a boom and then now some of those markets starting to cool off?
Yeah, so anything that I bought before COVID, they were already traveling nicely. Yeah. 8-9%. I was happy. I was like, why do we get told that these aren't going to grow? This is a bonus. And mind you, I got in for the first one just thinking that I'm going to get cash flow, 10 years I can retire. Yeah. So I didn't even think about growth. Yeah. And so suddenly getting all this growth, I'm like, this is fantastic. Then all that the pandemic did was just accelerate and push me forward 10 years. Yeah. And with clients, they obviously, whoever picked up property in 2020, 21 was great. Then we've seen some of those markets, come back. But a lot of those markets, I'm going to say 95 to 98%, have still either remained high or they've gone forward. So if you think about areas like, we bought a lot in South Australia, still pumping. We bought a lot in Perth, both metro and regional, absolutely took off in Western Australia. And then the only markets that really have slowed down is regional Victoria. And that's more to do with the policies that they've got in that state, which again is that point. If you're diversifying your risk, I'm going into different states, which means I don't have all of my eggs in one basket. Imagine you had all your properties in Queensland when they announced that stupid idea of the land tax issue. Oh, bro. And people started buckling and they started selling some properties that were, well above those means. And I was like, cool, we'll just pick them up. Yeah. And it got passed. No, it never got passed. And they were regretting it. But if you had all your properties in Victoria, regional Victoria, and then you have this government come in, you're now screwed. So that's why I like diversifying. I've got properties in regional Victoria. I was like, okay, cool. I can weather the storm because the properties I've got in Western Australia have just grown by 20%. Cool. I'll work around it.
I love that. So you talked about, you reckon 95 to 98% of the markets still do well. There's still good buying in the not in Sydney, in diversifying a little bit. What are and I assume this is obviously something you do a lot of in your buyer's agency. What are the metrics you look at? If you were to give me, and what's the process?
What's the secret?
What's the secret? What's the IP? Yeah. What's the secret? What's your
business model? Can you please provide us with your business plan so we can replicate it?
I'll come here next week with this new buyer's agency.
Latitude buyer's agency. No.
Look, I think, in terms of, without getting too nitty gritty in the details, because I think some people get caught up too much in the data.
Too much in the tactics, not enough about the strategy.
Yeah, and execution is everything. So we've had people that for the last 6 months, all they've done is looked at every property that's come on the market. And I'm like, guess what? You didn't capture 5 to 10% of the properties that sold off market. So you would never have that opportunity to understand the market at the level we can. Because if, say, an agent does sell off market and it's to us, well, we can capture that data. So we know 2 weeks ago, we bought one on the same street. So when another real estate agent is now selling us another property online and saying, hey, it's worth this much. Well, it's not, because last week we picked up that. So now we can use that as a comparable where most people can't. So that's the first thing. The other part to it is the relationships are key. I think most people can sit there and do the research themselves, right? I think they can honestly do that. And I've said it to some people where they've had a strategy session and I'm like, look, you love this stuff. You should probably try it yourself. and they go and try it for 6 months and like, okay, well, now I'm in your hands because I couldn't execute. How are you going to execute? How do you compete with someone who's in the industry? And in our team, we've got like 4 or 5 buyers agents now. So they're constantly on the phones. They work 7 days a week. And if they've got connections with these agents where they've bought 5 or 6 properties, they trust us so much that we're going to deliver a client that's got finance, it's not going to fall over, and we'll make it work.
Yeah.
How do you compete with that?
I love that.
So you're talking about execution, and I super love this because we always have debates in office about like there's a research process, there's data, there's getting in all the sensory, and then there's how about you just bloody do something?
Yep.
And you seem like you've combined both those factors into the business where you got the research down pat and you got a broader range of data to go with and you know, including stuff that you're collecting from your own database and transactions. But then you've got the guys on the ground that are pushing and forcing the transaction, speaking with agents and helping encourage people over the line when they're maybe a bit gun shy. So that service in of itself is probably worth the entry for whatever it is that, you know.
Exactly.
And you said that like some people for 6 months have been twiddling their thumbs, and then in most markets, from you know my limited research, but I think most markets, maybe except for some of those Melbourne ones, have gone well in those 6 months. So they've left money on the table by not executing earlier.
Yeah, 100%. Like if you think about, let's call it, you know, 15, 16K for a buyer's agent, right? So you go, okay, I don't want to pay that. I want to research it myself. Okay, how long are you going to research for? If you actually want to do the market properly and you just did one market, you'd probably do it for about 3 months minimum, and then you've got to go find the property. So now you know exactly which ones you want to target. And I saw this so much over the last 6 months in around Western Australia. They were like, I know what markets to get into. Awesome, go for it. What they realized was these agents don't want to sell to them because they're like, anyone's going to buy from me. So being a real estate agent out in the West is like super easy if you have listings. And so what they found was they were like, okay, I know the research. I know which property to pick up. I just have to wait now. Well, in that same market, we've picked up 4 properties in the last 4 months. So those are properties you could have picked up. And so when you think about 15, 16K, in the period of 6 months on a property that's 500K worth, growing at 10%, bro, there's $25,000 already there, right? If I'm thinking about the maths properly. Yeah. So you've already offset all of those gains. Plus you could have got into the market when you can now start increasing your rents, your cash flow's better. You already got into the market, which means now you're realizing that equity to be able to go for your second one. So execution, I think 100%. Bro, if I came here and I said, hey, I don't want an accountant, I'll learn it myself. How long do you think it's actually going to take me to learn it?
Yeah. 20 years.
About,
and I still probably wouldn't know it.
We still learn every day. I love that you talk about execution. I love that you both talk about execution. There's a book I've been reading recently called The CEO Next Door, and it talks about the top, so obviously the top performing CEOs. There's 4 characteristics that set them apart. One of them is reliability, so saying something and actually doing it is huge, and speed to make decision and speed to execute. You cannot compete with that. So, and then especially, John's very much execution focused, so it's really encouraged me as well to run with it, just execute, learn, fail, figure it out, and see what happens. So I love that we've been able to have that sort of discussion. So tell me, all right, you buy a few properties, you're a true believer in what you're doing, you go and help others do the same thing. I liken this to if I'm someone who loves making cakes, right, and then I eventually get out and start my own cake business, I start to not hate making cakes, but it's not something I love anymore, and it's a job, right? Yep. And so there's that big disconnect between people who just say, you'll love what you do, you'll love what you do. Yeah, you love what you do, but there are up days, bad days, good days. And there's a special pivot that every business owner has to go through, okay? And that's found in it's called the E-Myth, the entrepreneurial myth. There's a book about it by Michael Gerber, and he talks about going from the technician to the business owner and that transition that someone has to go through. And part of that transition involves setting up systems, setting up processes, getting that IP together and getting people to buy into your philosophy and how you do things so they can find property. Because it can't be Ravi traveling on planes every day to regional Victoria one day and then regional WA the other day. How did you go from I'm a guy who loves investing and who does this for myself and helping others to I'm AFR top 100 growing fast startups? How do you make that journey? What mindset shift did you have to go through, and what did you realize you had to build along the way to get to where you are today?
That's a mad question. And I think the reality is surrounding yourself with people who've done it before, or get books and podcasts, because really we're not reinventing the wheel here. Someone's already done what we're trying to do. Maybe the product's different, maybe the service is a little different, but scaling up, the same issues you're going to have, we're going to have, is the same sort of thing. And so I realized that the core group I had around me were pushing me to go and scale. And I was always under the impression, I'm like, the bigger I get, the more headaches I'm going to get. And what they said is it actually gets easier if you get bigger. Because then what you can do is you can specialize on tasks that only you can do, and the rest of it is someone else doing it. So not only are they doing it, but they might be experts in that actual task. So if we get a marketing coordinator, that person is better than me at marketing. So I'm now outsourcing to get the right people, the right talent. So for me, when I was growing, and I probably ran the business in a different way to most people, where I was like heavily focused on high profits. So I didn't really care about revenue. I had no intention to sell the business. So a lot of businesses, they'll start and they'll go, cool, I'll get the highest revenue number, highest multiple on valuation, and then I'll sell it. I'll build something else. My thing was, I love this. I have no plans to sell it. So if I have to build a foundation and I grow properly, that's why I did the YouTube stuff for so long, right? I had no one viewed me, but I was like, at some point, this might pay off. So the way I look at social media, or I look at building the business, was I'm planting seeds, and at some point, I'll get to harvest these. And the way that I looked at it was forward plan. So I keep building my portfolio. I take what I need from the business, because at the end of the day, what happens if a new regulation came out and they wiped out buyer's agents? Well, I had nothing to show for it in the last couple of years, you know?
Yeah. So as a business owner myself, some of what you're saying resonates with me, because I'm always having the decision, or like having the discussion in my head about what's the right trade-off between reinvestment, profit versus efficiency and value for clients, and then also how much money should I be leaving in the business and how much should I be taking off the table. If I'm in the shoes of Ravi Sharma, I imagine you're having a constant decision about growing the business versus I just saw this property in regional South Australia, which is perfect. Is this 100 grand better spent here, or should I pull it out and go into the property market? How are you making that decision about investing in property versus growing your business?
Yeah, and exactly what you just described is what I was going through probably for the last 18 months. And in the first part of that 18 months, I've always gone property, always going to buy that property. But what I've realized over time, getting the right people around me as well, they've just told me the return you get on your business is going to be far outweighing or outperforming what you do with property.
Because property goes, like if we look at the average for 30, 40 years, I'm thinking something like 6%, 7%.
Yeah, it's about 7%.
7%. And then your ROI, if your business is profitable, could be 20, 30, 40, 50%. So there is that, but there is that trade-off. So are you saying to yourself, well, now I've got my property portfolio to a certain point where I've done the 10, however many properties it gets, it takes to get to your portfolio. Now I can really scale the business, and like that's my nest egg, and future is safe, but now the business is really where I can blow up.
100%. And I think the other part to it as well that I didn't realize before was when you've hired a team, and we've gone from a team of this time last year, we're at like 3 or 4 people, and now we're at 15. And so we've really gone, I'm done with my properties. I will still continue buying, but I can now buy with the properties doing what they need to do. So equity from the properties keep buying me more, and I can do that on the side. But the focus is now get the business in the right position. And the reason I say that is because I've now realized by having employees as well that I want to help change their lives too. Yeah. So I can only do that if I continue reinvesting into the business. And in turn, they obviously recognize that as well, that, we're growing because he doesn't need to grow it for himself. It's more about all of us now as well. Obviously, got my brother involved as well, so I want him to get his life set up shit and all that shit too.
Yeah.
And so...
Why do you want your brother's life to get set up shit?
We're not editing that. We're not editing that at all.
The true intentions came out. Huh? He's probably listening. He's like, what the hell?
Shout out to Ravi's brother.
That's actually so nice what you said, because I've got employees as well. We've got employees in the business, and like the pressure, which you were probably thinking about, is not so much the work, but you love your employees. You want to see them do well. You want to see their net balance sheet grow, their careers flourish. So the pressure of the business is like, if this all died tomorrow, you know what? I've done pretty well. I might be all right. But how about the 10, 20 people?
Exactly.
Inside. So like, what's it like transitioning to that?
It gives you a greater sense of responsibility, I think. And it's getting me to think differently about the business. To your point, how much do I take off the table for myself? Now I'm going, well, if I did spend an extra 100K and I improve this, could this mean extra time here, productivity increases, and then the returns come? So I think it's definitely a pivot, but it takes time to get my head around it because I see deals all the time. So I see like 5 or 6 good properties every single day. I'm like, yeah, I might get that one. But I've now made an attempt like in line with my goals for the next 5 years. That's how I'm operating it.
Yeah, there's an analogy that always comes to mind. I always say this. The Australian dream is to buy a home. The American dream is to start a business.
Let's change that right now.
Bro, if I could, let me tell you. So the competing ideas is your literal real life every single day, where obviously the business is there to provide a return to the marketplace, to take care of its people and do all that sort of thing. But there's a natural inclination. I think an Australian business owner needs to go through the journey to see the business dream. They naturally start off being like, okay, I'll get a job, buy a property, then I'll start a business to fund the property. And then it's like, okay, I actually have to I have to actually scale this business to take care of my employees, to add value to the marketplace and add and create value to the world, where buying property is great and it's amazing. It takes care of yourself and the people you love and it provides homes, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't think anyone provides as much value as a business owner getting out there, adding value into the world and creating jobs. So I love that you've gone through that journey at a young age as well. We're accountants, we see this every day. The amount of times we have the discussion of, okay, I don't think you need to pay yourself that much. You're doing all right at a personal level. The business is starving. It needs the funds. It needs to keep growing. Or like the most common discussion I have day one of the business is, okay, how much should I pay myself? Well, it depends. How much do you need to live on?
Yep.
If you need to live on a really significant sum, it is an uphill battle trying to build this business because they're just, okay, whatever. There's factors in life that you don't necessarily start the business knowing this. Mm-hmm. So you might have bought 3 properties having to service the debt and then having to pull money out of the business. You've shot yourself in the foot. It's a conversation about, do you really need the property and whatever. More of financial advice for financial planners to go through. But it's such a good. I love that you learnt it early. So I actually I'm a big fan of that. So pivoting a little bit off the buyer's agency, I want to talk to you about your YouTube channel a little bit. And I'm going to reference something. I'm going to set this up, and then you'll see sort of where I'm going with that. We had the Super Bowl. You were an NFL fan. Did you watch the Super Bowl? And absolutely
I'm an NRL guy.
Okay.
Yeah,
Who do you
follow?
go for? Yeah,
I go for the New Zealand Warriors.
Oh, really?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How come?
That's the exact
Since
same
last
response
year
every
or-
single time.
Yeah.
Mate, last year I've been the happiest I've ever been on weekends. I can tell you that much.
Yeah.
Oh, it was awesome. No, I got into like watching footy when I was like in year 4 or 5, whatever.
Yeah.
And they were like the hot new thing,
Yeah.
and they would just throw the ball around.
Right,
and I was
yeah.
like,
They had
mate,
that side,
I only got into this because of them.
Yeah,
And
it's
so
fun to watch.
I've always just followed them. They've always been the underdogs,
Yeah.
and there's a bit of I like that.
Yeah.
So no, last year was great, mate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, who do you guys follow?
I follow the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs.
Nice.
And I think that you're a bit of a trader because you grew up around Campsie as well.
Yeah, I should have
And
followed
you
the
should have
Bulldogs.
followed
Huh?
but I won't hold that against you.
Mind you,
Yeah.
when I should have followed them. They were a
That's
top
the
team
local
back
team.
then.
Yeah,
Huh?
yeah, they were good
Dogs of
too. They
war.
were the entertainers back in the old days. That's what they used to call them. But yeah, they were a good team to watch. So after this podcast, if you want to make it out of here safely, we'll have another discussion.
But I feel like the last year, and for a lot of people, Warriors are everyone's second favorite team.
Yeah.
They have their team. No worries if the poor Bulldogs, if we're in 15th or 16th place, we'll jump on the Warriors.
Everyone loves the
bandwagon.
Waz.
Yeah, up the Waz,
Up
man.
the
I
Waz.
love it.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, so you don't like NFL. I'm still going to use the analogy.
Yeah, go for it.
The Super Bowl commercials, very highly edited. All the who's who of Hollywood in the Super Bowl commercials. The cheesiest Super Bowl
so good,
commercials.
man.
It's the best 30-second slot you're ever going to get, and it costs you $7 million, at least for 2023. Okay, Kanye West, as much love him or hate him, very controversial. I get it. Does a Super Bowl ad, pays $7 million, and gets an iPhone, films himself at the back of a cab. Okay, in quote word for word is so we spent the $7 million just buying the ad slot. We ran out of the budget for the actual filming of the slot. So anyway, I have these shoes on my website. I'm going to leave my website name. Here's my website names. Please go and buy the shoes.
He's crazy.
That was
He's just crazy.
Yes.
$7 million.
$7 million to tell people to go on his website and buy his shoes, right?
How much
Everyone
did he sell?
else is doing
How many did he
Oh,
sell?
90 mil,
like
90 mil plus.
Yeah. So
Far out.
yeah. So ROI was like 10x. Grant Cardone sort of stuff. Yeah. Bashara would love that. So anyway, what we call that, what I've learned from that is it's the purple cow. It's there's someone who came up with that purple cow concept, where everyone's the ordinary black and white cow, and you're this purple cow standing out in the marketplace. That's what Kanye did, and I love that. I love that so much. That's what we try to do in the accounting game, right? You have done that successfully in the property game. When you think buyer's agent, when you think real estate agent, when you think, I'm thinking selling Sunset, whatever the Australian version of that is.
Lux listings.
Yeah, Lux listings, the 3-piece suit, the rented Lamborghini, all that sort of stuff, right? You're just a bloke.
But be careful what you say next. I don't know where you're going with this.
Yeah, you're just a bloke.
What are you saying?
Drives a shit box.
But you're the purple cow, all right? You're the guy in the black shirt, and I'm saying this because I know you've said this in the past. You're just a guy in a black shirt who loves talking about property, who's out there nerding out on YouTube. Bro, tell me a little bit about that YouTube journey. How did it start? Have you seen results from it in the business? And just share a little bit about that YouTube journey for me.
Yeah, it's honestly, what you've described is exactly how it is. And when I started, if you look at my early videos, you'll see that I'm wearing a business shirt. I'm like trying to be all proper and shit because I thought that's
business shirt. What a loser! Who would wear a business shirt?
Who is a business shirt?
I wore a black shirt, just so you know. I have a suit in the car. I wore a black shirt because I knew Ravi.
He's gonna wear a shirt. There you go.
And so when I started off the YouTube channel, you'll see it. I look at these videos and it's just not me. And now you see a lot more of my personality because I'm confident to be able to go, look, this is my story. If you like it, awesome, we can chat. If you don't, it's okay as well. And so when I started YouTube, I was doing it one video every month. I wasn't taking it seriously. It was COVID. So I was just like, oh, I'll chill at home, whatever. And then it was my partner who's also in social media. And she was like, why don't you make more videos consistently? What is your excuse? And I was like, oh, no, I'm busy. She goes, with what? And so that was the trigger. And I was like, yeah, you're
promoting.
Promoting nightclubs. They're closed now. And so that pushed me to start making it consistently. And when you do anything consistently, you'll get better at it. Yeah. And I started growing an audience. So in the first couple of videos, I get 50 views. I remember I
was one of those. I was 49 without me, just so you know.
OG, mate. Thank you. It means a lot. And then from there, it started growing and just scaling up. And I think as I've become more myself on the channel and social media in general, I've realized that authenticity is the big, point of difference. Anyone can go and talk about the same stuff I talk about, and there are others out there that talk about property in general, right? But maybe people watch me because they like the black shirt or they like the little jokes and the dad jokes that I have and me as a person. What that's done in turn meant that I grew my business up until this year, all was organic. So every client that came through had watched hours of video content. So I'd get on the phone with them and like, oh my God, it's you, Now we started paid advertising because we're scaling up now the business and we want to try everything.
You talk to Bashara, so you have to spend money.
Yeah. I'm not spending enough apparently. Yeah. So, and so, with social media, it was I can hit a different audience, a different way. I didn't have to pop up onto billboards and things like that. I didn't have to have high production. I try and make it look good. But at the end of the day, I don't have a team. It's just myself. And I've enjoyed it. And the only reason I still make videos is because I actually enjoy it. So if I ever thought the buyer's agency's gone, everything's gone, I'll still make videos.
Still make videos. That's your calling, man, making videos. But you know what was cool about what you said? It's something I've only started to experience because we're dabbling in the marketing space and podcasts and things like that. But when you're getting a buyer or a customer or a client that's coming in and they've experienced Ravi Sharma, maybe Ravi Sharma's an acquired taste, but they've acquired that.
Yeah, correct.
So you're having pleasant experiences. You're doing a discovery call or meeting or whatever it is that you do to set up the relationship, and they've already gone and said, "Yeah, watch 20 hours. This guy, I like what your philosophy is. I like your style. I feel like I can trust you." You're vetted all the way through. So by the time they come in the front door, all that's left is for them to sign on the dotted line and buy a property in regional Western Australia or wherever it is, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's so different.
The legwork's done.
Yeah, correct. And it's so different now that we've started, using ads. We're getting a lot of people that have no idea who I am.
Different lead quality.
Correct. And so the lead quality is different, but it also gets me so optimistic about where we're headed because I'm like, hey, I've got 60,000 people that follow me. Everyone must know who I am. And now I've realized, holy crap, there's other people that like property and got no idea who I am.
Yeah.
So it's just really exciting to now embark on this next phase.
Yeah.
I'm happy for you, man. I'm keen to see where the paid journey takes you. All right, from a tactical standpoint, so there's a few prerequisites, I guess, in the YouTube game. You talked about it. You have to be consistent. You have to be putting up good quality content on a regular basis, right? Work hard, do all the things. They're prerequisites to play the game, I always say. What are the if I'm a person that's trying to create a successful YouTube channel? Talk to me about more of the tactical. And I've actually got a few quotes here, right? So these are your headlines on some of your YouTube videos.
Oh, nice. Okay, go for it.
So this is the classic, on the newspaper, you have to have a headline, and so the YouTube game's no different. Australia's death of the middle class. The worst since the 1990 recession. Prepare now. Building construction destroyed. We love a good destroyed.
Yeah, everything's
Ben Shapiro
destroyed.
destroyed. Are we screwed? That's such a Ravi Sharma. Are we screwed? What happens to the property prices during a recession? Okay.
I'm embarrassed right now because I'm thinking of all the TikTok hooks I use. It sounds there's a lot of hooks.
So obviously headlines are important, right? You've done YouTube for a bit now. You know what sort of works, what doesn't. Talk to me from a tactical perspective. What is working? What's not working? What do you find does well? Short form, long form, SEO, freaking titles. Like, tell me a little bit about.
Personally, those headlines is not something I would click on, right? So what I learned early on was I was making these titles going, hey, if I saw this title pop up on the YouTube algorithm, I'm clicking on it. And what I realized, no one watched it because we in general, we are so acclimatized to media headlines being like either it's doom or gloom. So you can see AFR headlines, they'll go from property prices will increase by 15% this year, or Australia's heading into a recession, this is what could mean. And so because of that, I had to go and deliver content that my audience wanted. And so there's a portion of yes, now I can create a lot of authentic content. I get to talk about stuff I really like, but you'll find that the headlines or the thumbnails, they're stuff that is going to get people into the door. But a lot of the content you'll see, like even in those videos, it ain't dramatic, bro. It ain't the world's collapsing.
That's the old cliche. Sell them what they want, give them what they need. So you're selling that natural, that they have that dopamine hit when they click on that.
Yeah, and I hate it. I hate the fact that I have to do it, but that's the game. Man. And I'm like, now I've come to terms with the fact that I have to be looking at this in a different light, where I'm actually doing people a favor by going and presenting that information to them in that way, because that might get them to click onto something and go, oh shit, I didn't think about it this way. Yeah. And that might change 10 people's minds, which is awesome.
We used to run the headline is, how can you save the most amount of tax? How can you pay the least? That it gets so many clicks. I tried to rebrand it to how to manage tax effectively, how to, just do the right thing is what I'm trying to tell people, right? But that doesn't get the clicks.
No.
So I don't know. Anyway, we're playing with that. But at the end of the day, you're right. It's use the hook, use that, get them in that top of funnel, and then actually give them what they need and make sure they're on the right path. So I love that you said that. All right, we're going to talk a little bit more about philosophy at the moment. There's a few questions I have for you, 3 in particular, right? So one of them is, I watched a video that you put out, and there was recently, I think it was 100 mil or 200 mil Powerball.
150 mil Powerball,
Powerball, yeah. So everyone...
So I won it, by the way.
Yeah. You don't live in Newcastle and you're not from Queensland.
Just buy suburbs at a time.
All right, so everyone and their dog got a ticket to that. And then you mentioned, all the things you do. You broke it up, but essentially the 3 categories were buy your dream home, very respectable. Invest into property, so skin in the game, obviously, putting the money where the mouth is. And then the other one you had is sort of not retire. You didn't mention the word retire, but effectively just give back and give back tax effectively. So do it through charities and DJs and whatnot, right? I want to challenge you on one thing. What would happen to Search Property TV or Search Property? Ravi Sharma wins 150 mil. Let's play the scenario that you do. I find that, like I said, I'm a big hero of the small business owner and the value they add into the marketplace. Would would Search Property still exist? What are you doing with Search Property when you're in the 150 million?
I should have added that in the video too.
Yeah.
You know, honestly, like I was trying to manifest that I was going to win this 150.
Yeah, we all did.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to sit there and realize what my life looks like.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I got really bored thinking about, I'm not going to have to answer to clients. I'm not going to do anything. That's fantastic. Then I realized I went on a trip in November to Thailand and I went with my missus and we sat on the beach one day and I was like, we've got no plans. We'll just sit on the beach, have good food. It's amazing. Bro, after like a couple of hours, I was so bored.
All right.
And what I realized was my brain wants to build things, right? So to answer your question, I've now put in all this effort to build a company. And yes, the money wise, yes, I've got all this money now sitting in the bank. That just might mean I can hire more people so I take less stress myself. Yes. But I don't think I'm going to let go of it. And I definitely wouldn't let go of making videos.
Now what you're saying is sexy because because you're telling me you make 150 million bucks on the Powerball, you still rock up, make the business better, keep doing what you're doing, keep buying properties. And now I believe in what you're doing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I get it.
And like that's the passion you need. And when I see like a founder sitting across the table who has that, like found that that's the purpose, you know, behind their business, then I go, okay, this is going to be successful. Because like, you know, Jacob always says, you know, you can't outcompete, but you know, people that love what they're doing. Outlast. And it looks like what you're saying to me is you're sitting in this perfect scenario on the beach, you know, having a drink, holidays with your family, everything's beautiful, but something inside you, the purpose part of you is lit up and said, no, I want to be back at my desk, you know, in my business doing well. So that like is inspirational, and that is like, that ties back into like a question I'd have for you about like the why of investing, right? So when people come in and they say, I want to buy a property or get on the property ladder or do any of these things, what's the motivation you're seeing for people? What's the why they're having when they come and say, okay, help me do this?
Well, for me, I've seen so many of my own family members now struggling. You know, rates have gone up. So it's like, what do I do? I've got kids and this and that. And that's painful.
Yeah.
And so now I can make some sort of a difference because, you know, family members don't take you seriously. You go to the barbecue, what do you know, mate? Yeah. And the reality is that like my whole idea or philosophy around the buyer's agency is that's just become now a tool for me to be able to help more people. So with the YouTube stuff, right? Yeah, I've got this one line that I'll say, download an ebook. If you want the help, I'll help you. But it's not a strong sell. And I've got 63,000. I don't have 62,000 clients, right? Yeah. So I'm aware that there's people out there that watch my videos consistently. They've used the skills or they've used the mindset shifts and they've done it themselves. That in my head is just good karma in the world. Somewhere along the lines, you know, I'm living a great life now and I'm super grateful. I think that continues. And so when it comes to the why, it's just going, I genuinely want to help people. And to be honest, going back to the question around the 150 mil, if I won it, honestly, I'd probably shift the business model and I would be able to do it for free. And that's probably what I'd do is go, okay, I can create all of my ongoing expenses get paid by my investments. I run it for free, which means I get to get more people and help as many as possible as well.
Yeah, you can't compete with that. There is nothing, if everyone thinks they're doing it for the money, and money is important, of course, you need to have some sort of wage to live on and do the things and provide for your family and do all that sort of stuff. That's just, obviously you have to do that, but you cannot compete with the what makes Elon special is he exited PayPal and he took every dollar out and he put it straight back into Tesla. He put it straight back into SpaceX and all the other stuff he does.
You got types of people with money too as well. Like I think you're showing your colors, like how you actually want to impact the world for a positive. But the best like litmus test is give someone a lot of money. Yeah. Okay. And then see what they do after that. And I think, you know, if you're someone who collects money and gets out, like everyone wants to get out of that, you know, that struggle, that baseline, like I need to survive, I need to pay bills, I need to have enough money to live, eat, you know, live, get all my physiological needs met. And then once someone gets past that comfort level, it's interesting to see what they do when they have money. And I feel like number one types, like inspirational leaders, founders, people with that mindset say, oh, I just want to keep helping more people and I'll do it for free. Do you know what I mean? And then other people with a different mindset have a different approach. They might just say, I'll just put it all in a savings account, earn interest and live a life on the farm where I don't have to see anyone. But not everyone's the same. But I find that the people who are innovating, and I see this in my small business client base, the ones that are running successful businesses are those types that say, okay, if I can get this business to, if I can have $5 million net worth and I'm comfortable, I would still turn up and find ways to do the business even better tomorrow. They're the types of people that grow successful businesses, and that's like Elon Musk and the Zuckerbergs and all these guys. It's like there isn't a financial need for them to go out and keep innovating and doing better and doing more. But there's something in the human spirit, at least for some of these people, that just says, I have to make the world a better place. Maybe it's an ego, or maybe, it depends. If it's broken, maybe that's like a supervillain. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a narcissist, like a crazy, like I just want to take over for the sake of pumping my ego. But if it's not broken and you're someone that wants to do good, you're gonna be like helping people and bring up your status by being that point of, change in the world.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like money exposes you, right? So same thing with social media. It's like, if you strip it all back, it's the content you're putting out there that reveals like your true intentions and what you're trying to do. And I think to the point that you're making, like you often hear it's like, oh, they're just wired differently. It's like, yeah, okay, they're wired differently, but and they might be just after the clout, like I run this, I run this city, all of that sort of stuff. But the reality is that, some people will take that money, never look back at business, and they'll just go, I'm out.
It's by the way, and it's easier said than done. I don't know. I hope to God that I would, still be as driven, and I would still be as passionate as I am about small business, even when you gave me 150 mil. But it's easy for me to sit here without 150 mil and admire Elon for putting his 150 mil back in. It's always different when it's your own money, but I appreciate that, man. All right, so the next sort of question I've got for you is the age-old argument that buying a property, buying a first home in Sydney today or in Australia today is far more difficult than it ever was. This is the hardest time to buy property. Young people stop eating smashed avos and it's just difficult, right? I don't know if I ever believed that it was more difficult to buy property today than what it was for previous generations, because they have the argument of interest rates were 20%, wages were lower. It made, I could sort of get that a little bit. Then I had some anecdotal evidence a couple of weeks ago, and it's someone we all know, and they said, I bought a property when I was 25 years old in the west, call it a suburb in Western Sydney. I bought a property at that age doing this job at 25 years old. I now have a business doing the same thing, and my 25-year-old staff member wants to buy a property in the same area, and he's in the exact same position I was in at the exact same age, and they can't buy a property in that same area at that given moment, right? And further to that, the interest rates are now the same, because yes, they went down to 2%, but they're now back to 5 to 7. And in 2013-ish, don't quote me on it, but at the time they were buying, it was also 5 to 7%. We sort of remember that time. Probably when you bought your first property, it was 5 to 7%, right? So has the property market become more difficult for a young person to attain, is my question. And if so, why?
It definitely has.
Okay.
If you want to buy a house now in Western Sydney, it's like $1 million. But like back then, it wasn't $1 million, right? And yes, you've got the argument, there's pros and cons for both. Back then, yes, interest rates were higher, but the properties were like $3 as well, right? And now
and your wage is $1.
And now the mindset hasn't really shifted. Like if I bought a house in Marylands, right? It's done really well, performed really well. But if I now want to buy something at the same sort of price point, one, banks look at debt very differently now than they did back then. They've got different calculators, everything's available. And then the other part to it as well is that same budget gets me a unit. Now you can't compare a unit to a house in a location like that, because high density, you can have 1,000 new units go up across the street. You can't have 1,000 new houses across the street. Yeah. And so I think like for like, you can't do the same thing. But I would go on to say it's the same thing with the internet. If I said to you back 20 years ago, hey, you should have multiple jobs, you can do stuff on the weekend, you can do it online, they'd be like, what the hell's online? And now you've got the option of working from anywhere. You've got all this information, and we probably grew up in the the golden period where we didn't have screens all the time. we used to go out and have real friends in real life and whatnot.
We're the
We used to have real
connectors.
friends before we had business.
Yeah, true. Yeah. Now we have no friends.
We call them clients here.
All my clients become a friend, because I'm lonely.
Clients, colleagues.
But we grew up during that time where I would love to be able to go back and where I can just go to my friend's house and play Pokemon cards.
Yeah.
But it doesn't work like that anymore. And you've got to get with the program.
Yeah.
And so to that point, is it unaffordable? Unaffordable, I don't know. Is it affordability crisis? Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But it was 30 years ago as well. People tried to buy a house and they were like, I struggle, I can't. It was the same story every single year. And I think now it's like, there's just more light on it, more people having the discussion.
Yep.
And it's getting to a point where the rich get richer because they can afford to buy assets.
Yeah.
And those who can't, they aren't willing to risk it for the biscuit by starting a business or starting a side hustle as well.
Why did it get like that though? Why? So, okay, I can confirm it has gotten more difficult. Okay, according to Ravi Sharma. Why has it become more difficult? What factors, what has happened in that time frame?
All right, I'll break it down like easiest way possible.
Sure.
If wages grow, right, at 2%, but properties grow at 5%, we have a problem. And then when you have inflation, right, when you have inflation, it actually, although a lot of people who have debt right now, they hate it. They're like, interest rates are so high. But do you know what inflation means? It means
Debt destruction.
correct. So if you've got debt, that's actually helping you pay it off tomorrow with inflated dollars. So if you think about it in that way, you've got people who've taken on the debt, taken on the risk, got the assets. Now they've gone up faster than any of people's wages, and I'm making more from my property portfolio than I do from the income I make. Unfortunately, it just keeps going, gets worse and worse.
So the disparity between income and property prices is getting wider.
Correct.
So like if you go back to 2001 in some charts I've seen to last year or so, it's gone from an average house in Sydney, say, because we're in Sydney, costing you 5 times what the average wage was, to now it's 16 or something ridiculous. Do you feel like that is, because you did say like it's the same as it was before, to push back, can we continue to see that disparity grow? Okay, and wouldn't we need to keep seeing that disparity grow for us to get the same rewards in the property market that we got over the last 20 years?
Yeah, I think, if you want to go from a $1 million property to become $2 million, right, that's a lot harder to do than a property going from 500 to $1 million, just based on where incomes are. That was my whole philosophy with investing. I was like, I don't think a property I buy for 3 million is going to turn to 6 million quicker than I buy a property that's 300 goes to 600, right? It's effectively the same thing. But then you would go on to argue that, because demand outweighs supply, like those $6 million homes, there's only like a handful of them. So when you get the buyer,
once you get them.
Yeah, correct. Once you get, like if you get it, you're not selling.
Yeah.
If you're selling, you'll have 10 buyers waiting for you, so they'll pay whatever
you're only
they
selling
pay.
to buy the $12 million one.
Yeah, that's it.
down the
You
road.
just keep moving it up.
Yeah.
But to answer your point, I think there's always this argument that actually has been going on for ages, decades, where it's like, nah, the market has to correct. We had a chat where you were like, at some point we need to correct, right?
Yes.
Healthy correction, yeah. But are we going to see a 30% drop? Well, there's going to be a price in both of your minds where you're like, if that property hits that price, I'm in.
Yeah.
And so I find it hard.
Could correction look like this? Could correction look like a stagnation in the rate of growth as compared to wage growth? Could we see a period in the next 30 years where wage inflation exceeds property price inflation?
Yeah, possibly. I'm not smart enough to comment on that, but
yeah.
I think long term, if you keep it basic and simple, you need to have assets. Yep. So whether people are listening to this going, I need to buy my own house, or got to get a unit, got to get a house in Sydney or like anywhere else in Australia, either way, attach that dollar to something. Because if we start seeing interest rates cut and we start seeing similar sort of things play out to what they've been doing for the last 50 years, the worst investment is the dollar. It's like down 99.9%.
No one wants to be in cash. Well, there's no way I'd say to you, everyone should be in cash, because they print it willy-nilly and issue bonds and whatever. So it's fiat currency is rubbish, right?
Let me just stop you there. But in the same token, you can't be no cash. All right.
No,
so there's an
strategy
argument.
can't be to just save cash.
No, yeah, but there's an argument. There's an argument. Like the 10x philosophy is go broke every. He has a philosophy like go broke every 6 months. Take every dollar out of your account, go buy property, leverage up to the hill.
Yeah, that's a bit extreme.
Yeah, because that dies when you tell that.
But let me finish my point, because that wasn't the point of the question. What I wanted to say is, if you're looking at the investment options, right? You've got all the stock market, properties, commodities, property, right? Property, commodities, crypto, all the various investments. NFTs, every new type of investment we come up with. All right, now gun to your head. All right, Ravi Sharma, gun to your head. You have to say, I honestly think in the next 20 years, this is a good investment choice. Are you saying the property is still, when you compare all the options across the board, still the best or good or safest option in that scenario?
I think so personally, yes.
Yeah. Why?
I think it's more to do with the historical trends of land. So I've gone, okay, whether it's a house today... So you're taking
units off the shelf, off the table? And
yeah, look, I think units in some cases will do well because you can't ever get that view from a house, right? So there's still uniqueness in some of them. 90%, if not more, are complete rubbish. They're just cardboard boxes that you get sold is the next best thing. Yeah. So I don't advocate for that, but I think unique properties is the key, and then owning land. Mm-hmm. And if you're owning land, then it doesn't matter if it's a house today, if it's a unit tomorrow, whatever it is, like that position will always be yours. And so when I think about whether we go back to a system where it's barter system or whatever, people need some sort of shelter because that's like one of the basic needs we have, food and shelter. So I think personally, if I was to be invested in something, do we need cash? No, well, you could replace it with other things, like gold, Bitcoin, whatever. But with the house, I need somewhere to stay. I need somewhere to live. And if you're in an area where people want to live there, like Australia's beautiful. People from all over overseas come here to Australia to live here long term. So that's why I would go property every day.
Australian property, specifically Australian property.
Yeah, I don't know enough about
the other markets.
Yeah.
Okay.
What would you guys do?
Yeah, I'm keen.
Look, I look at the last 20 years in property, and obviously, I've made money. A lot of people have made money. My client base has made money, and I just see some of the factors that we've had in the last 70 years in the West, in Australia, even we've had like industrialization in the third, like in China, help boost up our economy. We've had population growth that's unprecedented. If we zoom out enough, and I'm not talking about your 1, 3, 5 year projections in some of your isolated markets. If I'm looking at property market as a whole, how it's performed from 2000 to say 2020, if I was to say for that to repeat itself from 2020 or 2023 to 2040, we'd need to see the average house price in Australia go from 16, or in Sydney from 16 times wages to 50 times wages. That means a person earning $100,000 a year is going to have to spend, $5 million on an average property. And I'm like, I'm also of the view, like you and yourself, that a correction has to come. Mm-hmm. And if that correction comes in the next 20 years, then it's impossible economically for the property market to be as lucrative in the next 20 years as it was in the last, because we didn't have that correction in the last 20 years. So inevitably, I do think properties will go up in value, in dollar terms. I do think property is still a safe, sound investment, and I do think we need them. But I think ultimately, as an asset class, the reckoning has to come. And when the reckoning comes on the Sydney property market, for example, like it's $400,000-500,000 more on average than, say, Melbourne, right? Yep. So maybe these regional centres and other capital cities will be insulated. But when the reckoning comes on a property market that's caught up in this artificial balloon, there has to be pain. Mm-hmm. There has to be a release valve somewhere. And I can't. And why we continue to invest and why we continue to follow this, keep doing what we did yesterday, is because no one can say that will happen in 1 year, 5 years, 15 years, 30 years. It's up to policymakers, governments, the sentiment of the public to go in and actually change for that reckoning to come, because we just keep kicking the ball further and further down the road. So in the fundamentals economically, there has to be a correction and a burst and pain. Mm-hmm. But when I do an assessment on a regional town which has got all this new infrastructure going in and things are so good and rents are doing this, I'm like, of course it's going to go up in the next 5 years. I can't tell you where it's going to come, but it's going to have to come. And I don't want to be left holding the bag when it does. So diversification and all the other things become important at that point.
And just to clarify, my position is not that there has to be a correction as such. From an economics perspective, the supply-demand has to correct itself at some point, right? So from an economic factor, all social, political, all that put aside, an economic correction, the Sydney property market defies economics at the moment, especially. But then you add, it's made more complex. The problem is made more complex when I've got a bunch of things listed, like who if you talk to someone in the 50s, 60s, it would be a one-income household. Now it's a two-income household. Now people are having kids later, so there's not a financial burden at that
The
younger
bank of
age.
mum and dad. People have less kids. Their parents have more money. They pull out $300,000-$400,000 and say, "Hey, you go buy a house." So there are factors that are helping prolong the problem or the bubble.
I've got a few listed down that I also want to go through as well. So the bank of mum and dad, excellent point. The banks, what do you think will happen when people can't no longer afford 30-year mortgages? They'll take on an extra 5 years, 10 years. Mortgages will go, because a 30-year mortgage, I could be wrong, but I don't imagine they were getting themselves for 30-year mortgages. I imagine that's a product that kept on, like in America they have the 15-year fix, or it's I don't know if that's unique to Australia, but I think the banks will come up with another
Jacob,
product.
are you supposing we'll have like intergenerational loans where we have like a 50-year loan and a 60-year property loan? You pass it down to your kids.
I could be wrong, but the what I can tell you is that the average age of someone passing away, 50 years ago was in the 40s to 50s. Now it's
85.
70 to 80. We're working longer. So it makes sense for me if I'm a bank to start lending over a longer period of time. We're working longer. That's sort of what the mortgage is reflecting, right? So there's some of that as well. The one thing I want to go through as well is, like I said, I always say this, the great Australian dream is to buy a home. For as long as the great Australian dream is to buy a home, we can be as irrational as we want with economics and people will still buy homes, right? There's just something in our DNA, I don't know what it is, but the Australian dream is to buy a home. And I think as long as that is in the system and as long as people have that mindset, then the property market keeps going up through whatever means. Lack of supply, we talk about the supply-demand curve. We just need more supply. We've got, John, you talk about this, we've got 500,000, apparently the number is 500,000 new migrants coming into Australia. Where are these people going to live? Albeit some are students. I'm not completely sold on all 500,000 of my property and whatever. There's like 200,000 to 300,000.
They're actually all in Ravi's inbox waiting for a new property.
They're all buying property, right?
All 62,000 subscribed, ready to go. So there's heaps of factors, right? And then the one that irks me the most is that people get so quick to cheer on the stage 3 tax cuts that just came out, right? Yep. People are so happy they get another, whatever it is. It might be $15 a week. It might be 100, whatever the number is. I get all this extra money and I'm in the middle class. But where does the money go from the middle class? It goes back into spending, which goes back into the hands of people who can afford to leverage and buy property. And so it actually just, whenever there is government stimulus, especially, what do you think happens when the first time owner grants go up, or when they abolish stamp duty and whatever? The developer's just chucking it on the price.
Yeah, correct.
The market just corrects for it. So I'm happy to be proven wrong, but a lot of the government stimulus measures, again, have gone in, economics alone, have driven up the prices to a point where, is it sustainable? Is it unsustainable? I don't know the answer to that, but I don't think it's just natural economic forces. I think there are things that are happening outside of that, societal factors, political factors, policy making, all that sort of stuff that's leading to that price increase and unaffordability. And I think when we're promised that affordability is going to be eased, I think that's a very tough thing to do. But what we're going to do on this podcast is solve that, right? So we have an affordability crisis, okay?
Just before we go on to that point,
Sure.
I think the points that you guys are making, they're 100% true. Like at some point, there needs to be a correction. And it might be severe, it might be a blip, but we don't know. And I think the problem right now is people are hoping that there's some sort of crash, and we come from emotion going, I hope there's a crash because that's the only way I'm going to get into this market. And unfortunately, because of that, you're now relying on outside forces. Even in business, you're like, okay, well, I hope I get more clients because of something happening in the Olympics or something happening. Yeah. Right? You're relying on outside forces to get you the outcome that you want.
Yeah.
If you look at any market cycle, you'll go, okay, out of 10 years, 1 year is going to be red, 9 years green. So I don't know which year is going to be red, but I would rather be in the market because 90% of the time it goes one way. And so I think the reality is that people get caught up in this sort of stuff. They get driven by the headlines, and unfortunately it means that they got analysis paralysis. They don't do anything. Yeah. And then you miss 80-90% of it until all your friends are making stupid money. Everyone tells you they get in at the top, and that's the red year, and you get wrecked.
But the difference, I would say, only about the looking at the philosophical question as opposed to doing what you need to do with the property is, if you need to buy a home to live in, well, that's fundamentally a necessity, whether you're renting or buying, and you need to fulfill that. But when you move into from living in a home to the rent investing or investing spectrum of buying a property portfolio, well, now you're actually moving into the speculation game, because you're now speculating that the property market's going to move. So whether you like it or not, there's an element of you're playing the headlines, whether you're going against them or for them, or depends who writes what in the AFR, because they write the opposite article on the same day and print it. It doesn't matter, right? So you now are in the speculation game because you're an investor. So I think you can't help but try and guess what's going to happen. I'm with you, right? I believe there isn't anything new under the sun. And if you just look back at the past, you generally see what's going to happen. The only difference I would be saying, I don't even think it's a difference, because I think we pretty much, fundamentally agree on what's going to happen. But I'd say my emphasis is like, I feel like an imminence about this result, because I can't fathom that continued like growth at this rate forever. And it feels like the cycles are even getting closer together, like the 17 and 21. It's like it moves every 4 years. Like, what's this? It's property Bitcoin now. 4-year cycles.
Well, that's it. It's like markets stay irrational longer than we can stay rational.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stuff that we're talking about now, think about how often this has been spoken about every single decade. And we've gone, how are you telling me the property I bought for 100K is going to be worth $30 million? But then put it into context, everyone's making $3 million a year as well.
We're crazy about property, man. We're so crazy about property. I read data this week that food banks are reporting for the first time households where both people are on over $90,000 a year each with mortgages are struggling to get food. They've seen an influx in that category, 90 plus now, come into food banks to get food because they can't eat. Because what are they going to do? They're going to pay their mortgage before they eat. I'll pay my mortgage and go to the food bank, because we're crazy about property. So there's an element of like insanity. And self-fulfilling prophecy, and there's a spiral element, and then like, hey, let's just get on the bandwagon. I hope I'm not holding, holding the bag.
I'll finalize this with one quote that we all know very well: time in the market versus timing the market. So very important.
Warren Buffett?
I don't know. Is it Warren Buffett?
Oh no, he's like that, man.
He's it's probably Warren Buffett, Charlie Munger, something. Gary Vee, who knows? But yeah, very important, and obviously get good advice when you're making big decisions like buying property. Speak to someone like Ravi, who's able to steer you in the right directions and has more of a grasp on what the heck is actually happening in the property market. Final question for you, Ravi. Ravi Sharma's PM for the day. We've identified that there is a housing crisis.
Idea, bro.
Opening nightclubs everywhere.
Everyone playing Pokemon cards.
The Sydney nightclub market's back on, boys. So we've identified some of the problems as to why we have that affordability crisis. You help solve that for regular Australians through buying property and rent investing and doing all that sort of stuff. So you've found a solution. But en masse for Australians, how do we make it more affordable for a young Australian, for an up-and-coming, someone who's dreaming, someone visionary that wants to buy property in Australia? How do we make it more accessible to them?
That's a big, loaded question. I think the first thing is you close off the taps for migration. I think we would have had the market fall further if we didn't have migration. So when we started seeing corrections, like interest rates went up by a crazy amount. We should have seen more of a correction. Why didn't we? Because we had migrants coming into the country. And I don't think it was done by accident. The government was like, hey, that's what we got to do to survive. And obviously the government's also incentivized to have the property market propped up. They make a bunch in taxes. So that's what they wanted. And so I think if we didn't have as many like migrants come into the country, then yes, there's cause and effect. Maybe we fall into a recession or whatnot. But when you ask me about the question about affordability, I think it'd be a lot more like accessible for people today than it actually is, because you got interest rates so high now that unless you've got high income, you can't buy. And so that's just blocked out a lot of people. So what happens when interest rates even cut by 100 basis points? You've got all these people, pent up demand, they're coming into the market too, which in the short term is just going to go and pop the property market to levels that we can't even imagine at this point. But that's the first place I would make the move.
Definitely. Cool. I'm not a big doom and gloomer as well. I think the headlines, it's going to go up by 30%, it's going to go down by 30%, and there's somewhere in between, right? Like, not always in life are we going to have the massive. Everyone wants to make the quick dollar. Everyone wants to see the property market crash because they're cashed up, ready to go. Everyone just needs to chill.
Yes.
Everyone just needs to chill. get good advice, get good counsel around you, make good financial decisions with those around you, get some financial advice. None of us are here are qualified. I don't know if you are, but we certainly aren't to give financial advice. So chill out, do the research and do the things. But what it sounds like, what I'm getting from you is that, it's just going to be unaffordable. That might be by design, it might not be. There are solutions out there. We just got to live with it and figure out the best path forward. Is that the...
Yeah, I think the bigger question for people to ask, anyone listening or watching, whatever, is why do you want to make such a quick run at this and you get all this money tomorrow? That's a bigger question to ask, because that means that you're not happy with what you've got at the moment. So let's try and figure that out. Why? And a lot of it is to do with keeping up with the Joneses, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, they've got a better car than me. I want a better car. But if you're happy in your lane, man, just stay in your lane. Like, have the nice house. If you want a house, you don't want to have 10 different properties to manage, do that. And it's okay. Yeah. If you want to work till 65 and you don't want to own a business, that's okay too. Yeah. But I think that misalignment of what you want and, what actions we're taking is totally warped. So, we can sit there and complain, but at the end of the day, if you're not executing...
So you're not there trying to drive the why for everyone. Everyone comes up with their own why. Yep. But if they're looking for a how... Definitely.
That's it. Exactly.
Come
how
and
and
find
execute.
Yeah. That's what I say is even on the channel, it's like, I can give you all the education and information. If you feel like you can't execute on this, and I'm not saying everyone should have 15 properties. I'm saying you just live in your lane. If you want to buy 3 properties, I'll help you.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's just how we can execute.
I love that because behind us, we have people come in who, single mum trying to start a side hustle to support her family. Love it. How can we help you get to where you want to be? How can we support you so that you don't have to, you don't miss school drop-offs and pick-ups and whatever? We have young bucks like yourself, coming in, I want to scale, I want to grow, It's all about helping people identify their dream and then helping them get there. So I love that your business does that. John, I'll finish off with yourself. How do we fix the unaffordability in property?
It's a big question.
It is.
Unaffordability is, I think largely at this point in Australia, a policy issue.
Yeah.
So we've got a whole bunch of things, and I'm not advocating for any one of these particular things to change tomorrow. Migration obviously is one of those things, but then again, migration is that lever. If we turn off, we could be in a recession or collapse.
Yeah.
Like we're
Bigger
already
problems.
at the point where we're at a per capita GDP recession. We're at 3/4 of negative growth. So migration is sort of keeping us out of a recession in one sense and keeping us productive. We've got a aging population. The migrants we bring in are in the 25 to 40 bracket, so they're the workforce that we're losing as the boomers actually retire. So yes, migration is a problem, but can we just turn it off? No, there's policies around that. Negative gearing is one of those things. I think the price of actually changing a home in most states in in Australia is ridiculous, like stamp duties and transfer costs and things like that, because what's happening is people with homes that are much bigger or that they don't need, they can't downsize as easy as they could, and that would free up more opportunities for people who need bigger homes to buy bigger homes. We've got to look at everything to do with the way we incentivize first home buyers to see if that's actually creating worse a demand problem, and is that price being inbuilt to inflate prices even more? And then the big one is the lending criteria. It's like how much, there's a direct correlation, I believe, with how much people can borrow and how high property prices grow. So there was that deregulation of the banking sector in the 80s where, they used to only lend on one income, and then it became 2 incomes and up to a certain percent of everyone's income. So ultimately, if you say to someone, you got 2 people that are emotionally invested in a property, and this person can borrow 2 million and this person can borrow 3 million, then the property price is now 3 million because you're emotionally invested. So I do believe in decentralization. I do believe in free markets, but in the economy we have now, where you have some sort of government intervention, then we need to look at what those interventions are doing, and we need to tweak them and change them. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
If it's causing more harm to first home buyers, to lower income earners, or people can't get on the property ladder, then we need to use those tools to actually make changes.
Definitely. So I like that you talked about tax reform. So I've got a proposed solution that
Here we
you
go.
know,
He was leading us up to this.
He's the real solution.
Here's the solution, guys.
All right, guys.
Your
now that
answers are
you've
shit.
obviously
Guys.
what you thought isn't going to work. So
Yeah,
I've done the
here's
work.
what I'm going to do.
So I love that. I love that you went on tax reform
Yeah.
because I think there's value in tax reform.
As a tax agent, is that a
you
bit
know,
predictable?
look, it's within my zone of within my zone of expertise. Tax-free zones. So I think that we should have tax-free zones in Australia, where, to me, there's a dual identity crisis. I've mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but I always say the Australian dream is to buy a home, the American dream is to start a business. I think we need to get people dreaming about starting businesses more than we need to get them to start dreaming about buying homes. Why? Because you build a business, you provide value, you give someone a job, and naturally the properties will come with that. So I think there's a stronger, and I think it does more for the productivity of society. It gives these migrants more jobs, more availability. We can take in even more migrants or turn that down. We know we have a queue of people ready to get in the country because we're providing so much opportunity for people. So I think we get a tax-free zone, call it Dubai in the middle of Australia or whatever you want, right? And everyone says, in the middle of Australia is uninhabitable. Bro, I was in Dubai in the middle of the desert and they had snow. All right, they had the shopping center. There was snow there. I was having a great time. All was well. Why? Because they have a tax-free zone. They
did until recently though. But
9% tax.
9%,
yeah. It's a patriotic tax. They've good branding on it as well. Anyway, so you create a tax-free zone. You get jobs, you get infrastructure in, and you start pulling people away from Sydney. I'm not talking go rural Australia. I'm talking 2 hours up the coast of Sydney. We need infrastructure. We need people to be able to go. Look, we get it. Australians love property, love the water, love that sort of coastal style of living that's attractive in Australia. Let's get tax-free havens just up from Australia. Keep the money here. Incentivize the jobs to go. Incentivize the people to go. Incentivize the infrastructure to build itself. Why in Australia can we drive from Sydney all the way to Brisbane without hitting a real capital city? We can hit Newcastle and that's decent. But the same journey happens in Europe, and you've got 3 major cities you've just crossed. The same in America, you've crossed 400,000 capital cities along the way. We need more places for businesses to thrive. Where businesses thrive, people thrive. Where people thrive, we can have that economic development, and we can have that land ownership, and we can make that Australian dream accessible for others.
So what we can do is you win the Powerball, right? Then you become
Jacob
PM. Then you can do whatever you like.
No, I'll stay away from
Bro,
politics.
I'll sign up.
I'm politics.
I want to go
free.
to tax-free Jacob Town.
Yeah. Seems fun. I'll promote it at nightclubs.
I'm politics free. I'm politics free since 2023. That's my. So we'll stay out of that game. We'll keep driving the business. We'll keep driving the heroing people like Ravi, people like yourself who went out there, had a crack, and want to help people and do and start businesses to do exactly that. It's been a pleasure having you on. I appreciate all your insight. I've been a big fan since day one, and so it's nice seeing it all come together. John, as always, mate, absolute
Thank
pleasure.
You, yeah.
We've been
it's a pleasure being here
longer
in
than
my
usual,
office.
but thanks for providing the space. Love having you on. Where can people find you, Ravi? Just a quick plug.
Yeah, just go onto the YouTube channel, Personal Finance with Ravi. I think that's the best place to start. Have a look around, learn what you want, and then if you want to contact us, then you go to the website searchpropertyau.com.au.
Awesome, Ravi. Thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me, boys.
No worries. That's
Thanks,
it.
mate. Hey, thanks, buddy.
Very good, thank you.